Just a quick heads up to clear up any confusion, throughout the review I'll be referring to the newly released Hitman 2016 as just Hitman, and Hitman Blood Money as just Blood Money. I really hate this new stupid naming gimmick. Please just call the next game Hitman 7. Okay, let me get this out of the way right now. I've never really been a huge fan of Hitman games. Something about the tone of them and the way the game's handled just put me off of the series, so going into this new Hitman game, I was a bit skeptical. But boy, was I taken by surprise with just how good this game really was. Hitman doesn't feel much like the old games, much to some people's dismay. Yes, it still stars the lovable, bald, barcoded man we all adore, but the tone of this game ratchets up the campiness and the corniness to the next level. While the older games had their funny moments, they are nothing compared to this new game. It can be downright silly at times, like killing a general by dropping a toilet on his head silly. Hitman also tries his hand at inspiring a spy movie sort of vibe, and I have to say that I appreciated it far more than the dry, borderline absurdist humor of the previous games. In fact, one of my most favorite changes coming from the older Hitman games to this newer one was the change up in the music. Hitman's music is the perfect complement to the tone this game sets, evoking almost a Sly Cooper level of plotting and sneakery. Having music straight out of James Bond just felt right in this game, and it helped wrap up the presentation of this new style extremely well. The tone wasn't the only thing that was spruced up either. The UI got a complete redesign and it functions extremely well, conveying a lot of information to the player via simple, easy to interpret indicators. This new UI helped clear up a lot of the confusion that existed in the older games. Now, instead of just playing the game long enough and fumbling through a bunch of failed mission attempts to get to the point where you can decrypt what's happening in front of you, you just get a simple, easy to understand marker above NPCs and clear labels on your map about the state both of you are in. This helped streamline the experience for me and was overall a much appreciated change. The design of the game has taken a huge turn too, arguably for the better. Instead of having smaller maps with more missions like in Blood Money, Hitman opts for larger maps with fewer story missions. I was initially not a huge fan of this idea, but the way Hitman utilizes these new, larger maps is just superb. Instead of only doing one mission in each map, you can now do dozens. This allows for the player to not only squeeze as much fun out of each map as they possibly can, but also to develop a much better understanding of each map naturally and without feeling as if they're grinding the same mission over and over. Don't want to immediately do the story mission again? That's cool. How about you try some escalation missions, or maybe try your hand at an elusive target? What about doing a community mission? All of these options are available to you right out of the gate, and they help the game feel fresh as you spend hours on each of the maps provided to you. This new design philosophy behind Hitman also coincides beautifully with the business model of the game. Hitman's business model was very unique in that it only launched with one map, while promising to release the other maps as the year went on. This was initially met with skepticism and was questioned pretty heavily, but it ended up working out exceptionally well in the end. The reason why it worked out so well for Hitman is that this game is designed to be played piecemeal. It's meant for you to pick it up and put it down whenever you feel like. Maps coming out every month or so lets you get ample time to experiment and mess around as much as you want with the latest map, without feeling like you need to move on or that you're missing out on limited content on other maps. The maps are expansive and diverse enough for this model to work, and I honestly cannot see any other game pulling the same business model off as well as Hitman did. In that same vein, Hitman also utilizes this new map designs and business model to showcase its incredible amount of replayability. Every story mission can be finished dozens of ways. Whether you want to just put a bullet in the back of the target's head, or whether you want to drop a statue of a moose on them, is up to you. But both of those methods and everything in between is a valid way to finish these missions. All of the other side missions also have a surprising amount of variance to them as well, leaving a lot up to player choice instead of railroading you into killing the target a certain way. The sheer amount of variance in each of these maps and missions makes Hitman one of the most replayable games I've played in quite some time. I cannot recall the last time just picking a game up and playing for a couple of hours felt so good and fulfilling. Whether I'm seeing new opportunities on the story missions or working my way through an escalation, I felt like everything I was doing was fresh and exciting in a way that I hadn't quite experienced before. Those new missions, by the way, also do a great job of spicing up the Hitman formula. Escalations offer a fantastic scaling challenge to take on and get extremely difficult as you near the end of a fully escalated mission, while elusive targets also give you plenty of reason to keep booting the game up, and they add a level of tension to the Hitman games never before seen. Having only one shot to take out a target ramps up the amount of time and effort you put into a simple execution. Not to mention that elusive targets usually come with their own narrated cinematic as well, which adds just that extra little layer of believability to round out an otherwise fantastic addition. Now, Hitman is great, but it isn't without its flaws. Hitman's performance is inexcusably bad. Running a GTX 980 and an overclocked i5 4690K, I crush this game's recommended requirements, and yet, I struggled to maintain 60 FPS in numerous areas throughout this game. The only well-optimized map seemed to be Hokkaido, while every other map ran extremely poorly, Sapienza being the worst offender, sometimes bottoming out at an unacceptable 28 frames per second. Given that this game has had a year to be tweaked and optimized, this is just indefensible. There is no reason this game should have ran as poorly as it did, and going forward into the next year, I sincerely hope IO Interactive does their best to ensure a smooth experience on the PC. The performance isn't the only sour aspect of this game though. Hitman being designed the way it is very much puts all of its eggs in one basket, where the map is really the crux of the whole system. So, following this logic, if a map is bad, then a large chunk of this game just won't be very enjoyable, since a lot of the pleasure you get out of this game comes from utilizing these well-designed maps. So, sadly, a couple of maps in this season were not quite up to par. Thankfully, it's really only a single map that doesn't quite do it for me, whereas a couple others are just simply mediocre. The map I'm referring to is, of course, Colorado. This map was just littered with far too many guards and didn't really offer an interesting gimmick. Having to juggle 4 different uniforms while trying to take out 4 different targets who are constantly surrounded by bodyguards was just tedious, and I had a very tough time pushing my way through this map. Bangkok and Marrakesh aren't anything to sing about either, but they weren't as offensively bad as Colorado was. Though, even still, 1/6 of the game being below par is a pretty big stain on the game. Even still, with the poor performance and a couple of shaky maps, I still thoroughly enjoyed my time spent with this game. I mean, Sapienza alone is enough to make up for any of the lesser maps, let's be honest. I felt like I easily got my money's worth out of this game, and then some, and I am very much looking forward to how this game develops over the next year. Overall, Hitman 2016 is a solid 5 out of 5, and I highly recommend giving this game a try.